I don't know. The league is super deep. You look at these teams, you're like, wow, that's a 9 seed. And you look at Miami and they have Bam and Jimmy Butler, and I don't feel like they're potentially a top 8 playoff team. We'll see what happens with them. What are you,
Can we stay on this though? I want to stay on because it was something that you said without me, and you basically were saying this version of the NBA isn't as exciting. And granted, you're going to get a ton of grief because it felt like you were already worried about the tax implications of all the Celtics contracts, and that with these new restrictions, if I'm hearing you right, that now the league has too much parity. And then that turned into the NFL, you think, being more fun than the NBA. So I want to stay on that with you because we haven't even talked about it off the air.
Yeah, the thing that I said last week was I don't like that teams that do everything right somehow still get penalized by it. That's the part I don't get. Like if you draft your own stars, if you make smart trades, you still get screwed. And the thing, and I guess Zach, because I was texting with Zach about it, apparently he wrote a piece in 2018 about how to take care of franchise guys with the luxury tax. And, if you have Curry for 15 years, should Curry count full boat on your luxury tax or should he count 70%? I just wish the league rewarded teams for continuity, which they just don't. They don't care. I think this is what they want. I think they love when it's like crazy June, crazy July, crazy February, people hopping around. I think the agents like it. I think the money gets dispersed in a different way and everybody's spending it. And I don't like it as much. Like, I think what we had, and this is what I said the other day, like what we had when Clay's leaving the Warriors, it was a big deal, partly because he played there for 13 years and him and Curry and Draymond lasted together that long. And that's what we're giving up with this new apron stuff. I don't think it's possible to keep teams. What is OKC going to do 4 years from now? Let's say they have like a really nice run here with Chet and with SGA and with Jalen Williams and some of their young guys. They're not going to be able to keep that together. So that's just the league we've stumbled into, is just these short bursts of having a team that's good for 3, 4, maybe 5 years. But if you really stumble into something great, you can't keep it. And I don't think that's right.
Okay, but you're suggesting that if it's really something great, that it could have staying power for longer than 5 years. And I don't really know that we've had a ton of examples of anything lasting longer. Maybe the player on the team, like a Magic or a Jordan.
It's 2 or 3-somes. Yeah, it's 2 people or 3, and then the supporting cast changes around them. So Golden State had the 3 guys that managed to stay together. Boston has Tatum and Brown now heading into year 8 and year 9 together. OKC will potentially have their guys hanging together for a while, but that's you're really talking about a nucleus that's a little smaller. Like the Celtics, it's really about Tatum and Brown, right? Ultimately, that'll be what makes that special. Everybody else will kind of move in and out of their orbit, but it's those 2 guys. That'll be what lasts. But I'm worried they're not going to be able to keep that.
But the league probably has more parity. We had 6 straight different champs.
Yeah.
The league has more parity than the NFL does right now.
True. Well, the NFL, there's more, 6 quarterbacks? I feel like you're defense attorneying me. I think the NFL has more parity than the NBA. You don't think? Like the NBA, the NFL has the ability to have.
I don't think it does. I don't think it does.
The NFL has the ability to have like the Packers just jump 7 wins in a year. The NBA doesn't have that.
Yeah, it's because of turnovers usually more than anything else.
I
think sometimes I used to fall for it. Like a new coach could come in and everything, and it's like, okay, well, last year they were -12 in turnovers, and this year they were +10. Then we acted like they were a completely different team. I mean, that's kind of what that sport is
part of it.
Is you're sitting there going, how is this team that was up 21-3 trying to hold off this team that's down 8 points at the very end? It's like, oh, because there were a couple turnovers. I don't know that it means the product. There's less possessions and all this type of stuff. But when I watched what you were talking about, it wasn't that I was like, you're totally wrong. I think we actually have to see how the second apron plays out here a little bit. And we're in a stretch of parity with basketball, which is, I thought, what people didn't like about basketball, where there weren't enough teams. It was just the same teams over and over again, especially when you go through the teens of LeBron with the Heat and then Cleveland up against the Golden State machine. Like that was a criticism. Even though more people watched it, the criticism was, what's the point? The season hasn't even started yet. It's going to be Golden State and Cleveland in the NBA Finals. And for the most part, that's what we got for a really long stretch. So now that we're going to have that happen a lot less likely in theory, because I still think some of this stuff plays out. And you're like, hey, wow, that's crazy. The guys that are the 5 best players in the league are still winning all the titles. How different is it really?
Yeah, but I think
it feels
you're
like there's more
missing
parity.
I know, but I think you're missing the point of like what
Your
the
argument?
piece that I cared about. Yeah, because you talk about like Mahomes, Burrow. In the NFL, there's 6, 7 teams that we kind of know are going to be in the mix every year as long as the supporting cast is good. But they're all attached to specific cities and they don't leave the cities in the NFL, right? Like Brady was with the Patriots for 20 years. Even Dak Prescott's been in Dallas for 10. Mahomes is going to be in the Chiefs his whole career. Joe Burrow is going to be in the Bengals his whole career. You go on down the line, the infrastructure is really the quarterback and the franchise and maybe the coach too. In the NBA, I think what's shifting is, are we going to have that quarterback kind of possibilities with the rosters? Whereas like the Celtics, Tatum and Brown together are the quarterback. With the Warriors, it was Curry and Clay forever were kind of the quarterback of that. In Milwaukee, it was Giannis and whatever infrastructure you could put around him. But Giannis is probably going to be the next one who wants to leave. I like when the guys stay in the same cities. I like that. To me, that's the most important thing. If you have a best guy that you've rooted for forever, I don't think you should have to be worried the guy's going to take off. Like that, it should be a situation where that guy and whoever like his best teammate was or whatever, then that should be what you get to watch for more than 4 or 5 years. And I think the NBA is now risking that in a real way with the second apron stuff. They're just going to make you think that Jaylen Brown is going to be on the Celtics in 4 years? Like, I really don't know, which seems insane. Those guys should retire together.
13 years in? Yeah, the likelihood is he's not going to be on the Celtics anymore. But
this is depressing.
It won't be right. But if it's Tatum and Brown, maybe that's the way, like you just said it. So I'm not presenting this to you as if you didn't think of it. Because, yeah, back to your original point, it was why penalize. This is almost more about an Oklahoma City discussion than it is even a Celtics discussion at this point. But that's kind of
when I brought it up, it wasn't a Celtics discussion.
I know. I was just having fun with you on that. But
that's what it turned into. What about Jokic and Murray? That's another one, right?
Yeah, but Jokic and Murray will always be able to work out. The problem is they paid Aaron Gordon so much money. They paid Michael Porter Jr. You want to talk about doing a deal like sight unseen, especially with the injury red flags. Yeah. Even though, look, when you get a title, nobody's really going to care about it all that much. It's still probably going to be the 2 guys. It may just be eliminating the 3rd guy or the assumption you can always add the 3rd guy. And the 3rd star thing's an endangered species.
Guy.
I don't think you are. If you have 2 really good guys,
what about
you're
Edwards
still be able
and
to pay
Towns? Are they going to stay together?
I hope not. You know what else, though, with the second apron and the analogy I've used in the past is like there's a reason why there's like when you're younger, it's good for you to have a credit limit, even if you could probably afford to have it be a little bit higher, is that you're just going to end up spending to the credit limit, especially when you're younger, at least for me, when you're stupid and you're just, whatever, you're not exactly hosting Squawk Box. So the owners do the second apron thing to make sure that happens, even though 14 of the last 16 title winners are taxpayers. Howard Beck did a really nice piece on The Ringer that I encourage people to check out with all this stuff, because even the Players Associations, they were talking about the second apron. It's like, wait, isn't this kind of like limiting some of the freewheeling spenders that you have here? And the Players Association rep in the piece even said it's basically like 2 to 3 teams every year that would even have gone over the second apron. So it's not like it's limiting everything. And then on top of the thing that's always important to remind all of us is that whatever you think the second apron does in limiting spending and costing players money, it doesn't really, because it's all part of the 51-49% split, and that there actually already is, in theory, a hard cap. The players are making 51% of all basketball-related income. It's just what it is. Now, I do think that this is a player empowerment pivot on top of everything else, because as this continues to play out, and there's going to be the guy that's a great player that's like, I want to go there, figure it out. They'll have a rule book for those teams that are flirting with the second apron that go, we actually can't do it. We didn't want to do it before, but we had to. Now I don't know that we can actually do it. It just, there's no freedom. The freedom of movement is limited in the way that we've seen in the past. So sure, it saves the owners, the taxpayers, a ton of money compared to what they were doing before, because they're just going to be so incentivized to stay under it. But I think the player movement has a big part of it, which, would penalize OKC if they had 5 guys. But I don't know that the Celtics are a really good example. Like, it's so rare that they could have 5 guys like this all be this good at the same time, all making this much money.
Well, that's true. But I think with let's look at San Antonio, right? Let's say Castle's really good. Let's say they nailed that pick. He ends up being the best guy in the draft. And let's say they get some awesome guy in the 2026 draft. Let's say they stumble into AJ. Now they have Wemby and Castle and AJ. And then, I don't know, Sohan becomes Scottie Pippen. Now you have the four guys. I don't see how you keep the four guys together. Now, the reason I was thinking about that defraying the cost of a franchise player is because, that's something the NFL should probably have too. And I've made the case for that too with them. Like if you have Mahomes and you've had Mahomes for 10 years, should he count against the salary cap in exactly the same way? This is what happened with Brady with New England forever, where he had to take discounts. Remember the last 5, 6, 7 years where he took less money so they would allegedly
so
field a better team, and they kind of
fucked
him on it. Yeah, they kind of fucked him on it. But I don't know. I like rewarding teams for ingenuity and continuity. And if we can't do that, I just think this is what the league's going to become, where every just guys bouncing around and maybe one guy is attached to a team and that's it. In football, it's different because if you have one of the 6, 7 quarterbacks, they usually don't go anywhere, right? You like Matt Stafford switch teams, Cousins switch team. Now I'm already dropping down the Cousins level. But if you have one of the OG guys, those guys usually don't switch teams. They stay there forever, and that becomes the continuity.
But based on the thing that you just laid out with the Spurs, what if they nail it? Okay, so what are they going to have, 4 all-stars, 4 consistent all-stars all at the same time? It doesn't really even happen. The fourth guy wouldn't even have enough options to even be able to put up the numbers
go back to the 80s Celtics and Lakers. How would those teams have stayed together? Everyone romanticizes all those teams. They would have had to get rid of McHale and probably Danny Ainge by 1987. The Lakers, there's no chance they would have been able to keep Worthy and Kareem and Magic and Byron Scott. That team doesn't exist. So I hope people understand that that's where we're moving. You might get for 1 year or 2 years, with the Celtics situation where you have the 5 or 6 guys, but they're not going to have that a year from now. That this is the last year for this group together. Right. So they have a chance to go back to back. But then after that, they'll have to trade Porzingis or they'll have to trade Drew Holiday. And maybe they'll even have to make 2 trades, not 1, just to try to get under this second apron. So it can cost them $450 million to have the team.
You think if they repeated with those guys under contract with the Holiday extension done, and the thing that scared me about the Porzingis trade wasn't so much who he was and what the number was, it was that they had to do the extension for him to pick up the player option because that was all part of it. That's
only this year and next year, right?
Yeah, but it still was
next year's
a 3-year commitment.
Yeah.
It's a 3-year commitment to somebody like Porzingis with the injury history. So then you've got the Tatum deal that's going to surpass the Brown deal that was historic and all these things. But if they were to win again, or say losing the NBA Finals or something, and everybody feels healthy and everybody likes what they're doing, you think they're just going to break it up to avoid being a second time offender and have their first round draft pick move to the back of the first round? Can you even... what are you really doing?
It's not just that. It's that repeater tax, right? It would be the lineup, the whole rotation a year from now, I think would cost $450 with the tax, or $450 million with the tax. I just don't.
Right, but I mean, the draft
a crazy amount of money.
The draft pick part of it's irrelevant because if you're that good anyway, all of a sudden it's oh no, we went from 29th to 30th.
Well, what do you think they should have done? Do you like
Celtics?
The second Abram? No, the second Abram. Do you like this new system?
If my goal was, when we first talked about it, and then I admit it, I have to sometimes. It's like the Bridges, Knicks, Houston trades all together, and just trying to map out all the draft picks, being do I have this right yet, or do I have this wrong? Is it 5 or is it 6? When there's new changes like this to CBA, I have to go over it a few times before I really realize it, and then I got to read other people to see if there's stuff that I'm missing, and then I usually send Bobby Marks 100 texts.
Right.
Of course, the owners have to have something in place to prevent themselves from themselves. Because one of my favorite things ever, when that hockey lockout happened in 2004, and I was buddies with a bunch of guys that I'd gone to school with that played, and I just was what's going on? And one of them just said, we were just hanging out. He's hey, if it's that big of an issue, stop paying us. And it's
the
super
NBA 20
simple.
years ago, the same thing. They couldn't stop themselves.
Yeah, it's a really simple thing. But if I were a player, I'm going, so what am I'm supposed to give you back? The hockey guys get destroyed in that thing. They had to give back like 25% of their existing contracts. They lost the season. They had look at the Maple Leafs team spending, and then what the first cap was versus what the Maple Leafs were actually versus what they were actually spending in the past. You're making that team that was spending that much in combined payroll go down to this number to have everybody else be able to catch up with them. And if you're a player, you're going, so you guys can't help yourselves, but it's our fucking fault. So I philosophically just believe in that. I believe in the player side of that, but the owners can't help themselves. So they have to put all these mechanisms in place. But I just think that the freedom of movement for the Suns are going to be this test of scaring the shit out of all these other teams.
Well, that was basically, so you look back at Golden State a couple of years ago, which is the reason I think we have the second apron to begin with. Because what was that time they spent like $350 million on their roster, and they just kept adding stuff, taking on contracts.
Lacob and Ballmer spent over 4 years. Lacob and Ballmer spent, and this is Bobby Marks' number, $950 million combined over 4 seasons.
And that's why we have this rule now, because of those two teams.
Right.
Yeah. People were like, "What the fuck, man? How are we supposed to compete with this? You're just hemorrhaging money and you don't care." But
you like the Warriors though being able to keep everybody.
They did what it took to win the 22 title, and it worked. I just feel like I don't ever want to get to a situation where we're redoing basically with the new rules what just happened with Clay and Draymond and Curry, and Clay's gone in like 2018, right? And you don't even get 20, even though the last few years of the Clay experience wasn't that much fun. But I look at what's going to happen with Boston. Like I just really worry that Tatum and Brown are going to retire as Celtics. Maybe one of them will, but with these new rules, it almost seems inconceivable both will, which I don't think is good for basketball, And if they can't figure out any sort of wrinkles to have teams take care of guys they drafted, smart things they did, I don't really understand what we're doing. But I would say that about football too.
But we also had the same thing with OKC when it was Harden, Durant, Westbrook, and Ibaka. Now they made a mistake. They could have wrote it out another year. They didn't really get back enough when they did the Harden trade. Harden also was somebody we didn't realize was going to become this impactful as a one for a team because his role was diminished, and good for him. Like there was a number that they offered him. No, they cheaped out. They made a mistake.
Like $6.5 million.
It has happened before. I just feel like maybe you're overreacting to it a little bit, in that if you have two special players, you're going to be able to keep the two guys together. And I think the Celtics are a really rare case of like roster construction because. Go ahead.
No, I worry Denver is the flip side of that, though.
That Denver's Boston 2 years from now
together. But if you make any mistake now, like you mentioned the Porter contract, once you have the two guys, if you make any mistake around those two guys, you almost can't recover. Now Jokic and Murray, instead of playing with Caldwell Pope, they have to keep their fingers crossed that Peyton Watson can hit a corner three in round 2. That's the part I don't.